Born on February 22nd, 1732, in the quiet hills of Westmoreland County, Virginia, George Washington would go on to shape the foundation of a new nation. Though he came from modest beginnings and lacked noble lineage, his future held extraordinary promise. The son of Augustine and Mary Ball Washington George belonged to the Virginia gentry, though his family was not among the wealthiest. His father's death when George was 11 limited his formal education, but he compensated with discipline, ambition, and a thirst for knowledge. He studied subjects like surveying and geometry, and by 17 had become a professional land surveyor, exploring the rugged Virginia frontier and learning to navigate its challenges and politics. At age 20, he joined the Virginia militia and by 22 was thrust into the French and Indian War. His first major test came in 1754 at Fort Necessity, where he faced defeat but earned respect for his courage and poise. He later served under British General Braddock in a disastrous campaign, emerging as a leader by rallying troops in the chaos. These formative military experiences shaped his strategic mindset. After the war, Washington returned to Virginia and in 1759 married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow. This union brought him land, wealth, and 2 stepchildren. At Mount Vernon, his estate by the Potomac River, he lived as a Virginia gentleman but remained deeply engaged in colonial politics. Serving in the Virginia House of Burgesses, he grew increasingly discontent with British rule, particularly after new taxes and restrictive acts. He joined the colonial boycott of British goods, standing with the growing resistance. When open conflict erupted in 1775, the Continental Congress appointed Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Over the next 8 years, he led the revolutionary forces through early setbacks, harsh winters, and shortages. His resolve, sense of duty, and openness to counsel gradually shifted the momentum. Key victories, including those at Trenton, Princeton, and Yorktown, helped secure American independence with crucial support from France. After the war, he chose to relinquish power and return to private life, an unprecedented act of humility. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. As you close your eyes and drift into sleep, picture a man standing under a snowy sky at Valley Forge, cloaked in a worn coat, gazing at an army that places its faith in him. Envision him entering New York at the war's end, modest, humble, and later, stepping away from power, not grasping for it. He stands beneath the stars of a new flag, uncertain of what the future holds, yet ready to lead. He believed in the improbable dream of a free republic, a dream that would come true. On October 30th, 1735, in the small town of Braintree, Massachusetts, a boy was born who would help shape a nation born from rebellion. His name was John Adams. Although often overshadowed by more prominent figures, his contribution to the founding of the United States was profound. The son of a farmer and shoemaker, young John was raised with a strong sense of duty, faith, and the value of education. He was spirited, sharp-minded, and independent. Despite an early dislike for school, his intellect flourished, leading him to Harvard, where he studied law and discovered a passion for ideas. Adams aspired to make an impact not through battle or riches, but through justice and the written word. Starting his law career in Boston, he quickly gained respect for his honesty and intellect. He stood by principles even when unpopular, such as when he defended British soldiers accused in the Boston Massacre of 1770. Though the case stirred controversy, he believed in fair trials and succeeded in acquitting most of the accused. Facts are stubborn things, he argued, words America would come to remember. While he defended the soldiers, his sympathies increasingly aligned with the cause of American independence. As tensions with Britain escalated, Adams served in both the First and Second Continental Congresses. He became a vocal supporter of independence, nominated George Washington to lead the Continental Army, and played a key role in promoting and helping to draft the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Although Thomas Jefferson penned the document, Adams was its fiercest advocate, passionately defending its ideals. He predicted July 2nd would be the nation's most memorable date, unaware the 4th would be celebrated instead. Adams was a driving force behind the quest for independence. After the war began, he journeyed across the ocean as a diplomat, enduring dangers and isolation to form alliances and negotiate peace. He worked with France and the Dutch Republic and helped draft the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which ended the war. Throughout the hardships, he remained committed, writing heartfelt letters to his wife, Abigail. Their correspondence stands as one of America's most enduring testaments to love and partnership in nation building. With the adoption of the Constitution, Adams became the first Vice President of the United States, serving from 1789 to 1797. Though he described the position as lacking influence, he remained dedicated, presiding over the Senate during the formation of the new government. At a time of deepening political divides, he aligned with the Federalists, supporting a strong central government and warning against populism and mob rule. In 1796, he narrowly won the presidency, defeating his former ally Thomas Jefferson. His term was fraught with challenges, including a naval conflict with France and the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts, which were criticized as suppressive. Despite the political pressures, Adams chose peace over conflict in 1800, refusing to enter war with France, an unpopular but ultimately wise decision that cost him re-election. That same year, he lost the presidency to Jefferson, marking the first peaceful transfer of power between rivals in the nation's history, a milestone for the young republic. Adams returned quietly to his home in Quincy, Massachusetts, where he spent his remaining years reading, writing, and enjoying time with his family. Later in life, he and Jefferson rekindled their friendship, exchanging letters rich with reflections on philosophy, politics, and their shared revolutionary past. Two former adversaries became thoughtful, aged allies. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams lay dying. His final words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives," unaware that Jefferson had died only hours earlier. Born in contrast, they were united in purpose. Do you like this personality? He left on the very day that marked the birth of their nation, as if destiny had woven poetry into the fabric of history. John Adams never sought fame. He was proud, often misunderstood, and sometimes seen as difficult, but his brilliance, principles, and indispensability shone through. He was the architect of independence, the conscience of the revolution, and an unrelenting advocate for law, reason, and Republican values. Adams recognized the dangers of unchecked power and the delicate nature of liberty. His deep affection for Abigail, his family, and his country resonates through the ages. Today we remember him not for his fame or charm, but for his steadfast devotion to the vision of America. Picture him at his desk, candlelight flickering, pen in hand, either writing to his wife, defending liberty, or grappling with the struggles of a fledgling nation. He sought no recognition. He simply did what was necessary because Adams believed honor was more valuable than popularity. A new nation found its voice with Thomas Jefferson. Born on April 13, 1743, in the serene hills of Shadwell, Virginia, Jefferson would go on to write some of the most powerful words in American history. Raised on a plantation by his father, Peter Jefferson, a surveyor and planter, and his mother, Jane Randolph, from a prominent Virginian family, Jefferson was immersed in books, nature, and ideas. His father's death at 14 left him with a wealth of knowledge, and Jefferson would soon grow into a Renaissance man, a thinker, writer, inventor, architect, musician, and farmer. Though quiet by nature, his mind burned with brilliance. He attended the College of William and Mary, studying Latin, Greek, philosophy, and law. Shaped by Enlightenment principles, Jefferson believed in reason, science, and the perfectibility of humankind. By his early 20s, he was practicing law and serving in the Virginia House of Burgesses, where his belief in liberty and limited government took root. He studied John Locke, admired Newton, and filled his library with books on government, architecture, and agriculture. But it was in the 1770s that Jefferson began to shape the nation's future. In 1776, as tensions with Britain reached a boiling point, the Continental Congress appointed a committee to draft a Declaration of Independence. The youngest member, Jefferson, was chosen to write it. In a rented room in Philadelphia, with a feather quill and conviction in his heart, he penned the immortal words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." The Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4, 1776, and the world was forever changed. Jefferson had given voice to a revolution. After independence, Jefferson served as governor of Virginia, guiding the state through the tumult of war. Though criticized for his handling of British invasions, his commitment to public education, legal reform, and religious freedom left a lasting mark. He later served as minister to France, following in Benjamin Franklin's footsteps. In France, he witnessed the early tremors of the French Revolution, empathizing with the ideals but fearing the violent extremes. During this period, tragedy struck when his beloved wife, Martha Wales Skelton Jefferson, passed away in 1782. Grief-stricken, he vowed never to remarry and kept her memory alive throughout his life. Upon returning to the U.S., Jefferson became Secretary of State under President George Washington, but his political differences with Federalist Alexander Hamilton soon led to sharp divisions. Jefferson became a leader of the Democratic Republicans, advocating for a vision of democracy that championed states' rights over centralized power, liberty over order, and the strength of America's farmers over its bankers. This political divide with Hamilton would shape the future of American politics. After serving as vice president under John Adams, Jefferson ran for president in 1800. The campaign was brutal, marked by slander and division, but Jefferson emerged victorious after a dramatic tie in the Electoral College and a tense decision by the House of Representatives. His election marked the first peaceful transfer of power between opposing political parties in American history. In his inaugural address, he famously declared, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists," calling for unity. His presidency became one of monumental achievement, during which he reduced the national debt, cut military spending, and repealed unpopular taxes. His greatest legacy came with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, when he acquired 828,000 square miles of land from France for $15 million, doubling the size of the United States. Though he had doubts about the constitutionality of the purchase, Jefferson believed in the vision of an empire of liberty, a nation of free farmers stretching from sea to shining sea. He also sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on an expedition to explore the newly acquired territory, launching one of the most legendary journeys in American history. Not all of Jefferson's presidency was marked by triumph. His second term was overshadowed by tensions with Britain and France, whose naval conflicts disrupted American trade. In response, Jefferson enacted the Embargo Act of 1807, halting U.S. exports, but the act backfired, damaging American commerce and drawing widespread criticism. In 1709, he retired to his beloved Virginia estate, Monticello, where he... Do you like this personality? He designed buildings, experimented with crops, and maintained correspondence with both friends and adversaries. He also founded the University of Virginia, describing it as the hobby of my old age. He believed that education was essential for the protection of democracy. In his later years, Jefferson rekindled a profound friendship with John Adams, his former rival. Their letters became a valuable collection of philosophical reflections, humor, and patriotic affection. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson passed away at Monticello. Just hours later, John Adams also died, marking the end of two monumental figures of the Revolution on the same day, as if the heavens themselves acknowledged their lifelong dedication. Jefferson's life was marked by contradictions. He famously wrote, "All men are created equal, yet owned enslaved people," including Sally Hemings, with whom he likely had children. He dreamed of liberty, but lived within a system of bondage. Today, he is remembered as both a visionary and a flawed individual whose writings gave voice to the ideals of a new nation. He designed Monticello, wrote the Declaration, founded a university, and inspired generations. His belief in freedom, education, and democratic ideals continues to resonate worldwide. Imagine a candlelit room in Philadelphia where a quiet man leans over a desk, ink-stained fingers guiding his quill over parchment. He is writing a bold declaration, a promise that all people are born free, that government exists to serve the governed, and that the world can be changed. Thomas Jefferson believed in the power of ideas, and through him the world transformed. Born on March 16, 1751, in Port Conway, Virginia, James Madison came into the world as a small, frail boy who would one day shape the very foundations of a nation. Despite his small stature and soft-spoken nature, his intellect was vast. Madison, the eldest of 12 children, grew up on a tobacco plantation in Orange County, in a wealthy yet grounded family. From an early age, he showed an intense curiosity, devouring books on Latin, Greek, history, mathematics, and law, while immersing himself in the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers. At Princeton University, he completed a 4-year degree in just 2 years. Driven by a hunger for knowledge, he became perhaps the most bookish and introverted of all the founding fathers, though his quiet nature should never be mistaken for weakness. By the 1770s, when the colonies were in turmoil, Madison, though not a fiery speaker or battlefield hero, firmly believed in liberty and representative government. He served in the Virginia state legislature and formed a lasting friendship with Thomas Jefferson. In 1780, Madison was elected to the Continental Congress, where he became a strong advocate for strengthening the fledgling American government. He saw firsthand how the Articles of Confederation had left the nation weak and divided. He envisioned a system that balanced freedom with unity, state power with federal strength, and one that would endure for generations. In 1787, Madison arrived in Philadelphia with a detailed plan, the Virginia Plan, which called for a government with 3 branches and a system of checks and balances. During the Constitutional Convention, he spoke over 150 times, meticulously recording the proceedings, and emerged as the intellectual heart of the convention. Though many contributed, it was Madison who provided the framework for the United States Constitution. Along with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, he co-authored the Federalist Papers, a series of essays defending the Constitution with Madison's contributions, particularly Federalist Number 10 and Number 51, still studied for their brilliance in explaining democracy. Having helped create a government not of kings or mobs, but one of reason and law, Madison, despite initial doubts, agreed to draft the Bill of Rights in response to concerns that the Constitution lacked protections for individual liberties. As a representative in the first Congress, he led the effort to draft what became the first 10 amendments, which were ratified in 1791 and guaranteed freedoms such as speech, religion, the press, and due process. In 1794, at 43, Madison married Dolly Payne Todd, a vibrant widow with charm and social brilliance. Where Madison was reserved, Dolly shone, and together they formed a perfect political partnership. As First Lady, Dolly became one of the most beloved hosting social events that bridged political divides. Madison served as Secretary of State under President Jefferson, playing a pivotal role in the Louisiana Purchase and defending American interests against British and French interference. But in 1809, it was Madison's turn to lead, becoming the 4th President of the United States. His presidency was defined by the War of 1812, a conflict sparked by British violations of American sovereignty, such as impressing sailors and blocking trade. Reluctantly, Madison requested Congress to declare war. The war, however, was chaotic, poorly prepared, and highly controversial. In 1814, British forces invaded Washington, D.C. and set fire to the White House. Dolly Madison famously saved important documents and a portrait of George Washington before fleeing. The war ended in 1815 with the Treaty of Ghent, giving rise to a new sense of American identity. The Battle of New Orleans, led by Andrew Jackson, sparked pride and patriotism. James Madison, once a quiet scholar, had overseen one of the most pivotal moments in U.S. history. After leaving office in 1817, Madison retired to his estate, Montpelier, in Virginia, where he focused on farming, managing debts, and exploring constitutional theory. He also served as the rector of the University of Virginia, helping Thomas Jefferson foster a new generation of thinkers. As tensions over slavery grew, Madison, like many of his time, faced contradictions. While he opposed the international slave trade and supported gradual emancipation, he owned enslaved people throughout his life. His legacy, like Jefferson's, is marked by both remarkable vision and troubling hypocrisy. Madison passed away on June 28, 1836, at the age of 85, the last surviving signer of the Constitution. He outlived his peers, witnessed the growth and strain of the country he helped establish, and left behind a legacy of thoughtful governance, deliberative debate, and constitutional dedication. His ideas are still embedded in the law and the framework of government. His vision of a republic built on law, where ideas rather than individuals hold sway, remains alive in every branch of government. James Monroe, born on April 28, 1758, in Westmoreland County, Virginia, would later become the 5th President of the United States. Though less flamboyant than some of his revolutionary counterparts, his legacy proved lasting. The son of a modest planter and carpenter, Monroe took on family responsibilities after his father's early death while pursuing an education. He enrolled at the College of William and Mary, but in 1776, at the age of 18, Monroe left to join the Continental Army. He served with distinction, fighting in the Battle of Trenton, where he was wounded, and enduring the hardships of Valley Forge. He rose to the rank of major, earning respect from his fellow patriots. After his military service, Monroe studied law under Thomas Jefferson, forming a close mentorship that shaped his future. Monroe entered politics as a delegate to the Continental Congress and later helped draft Virginia's new Constitution. He served in the U.S. Senate and as governor of Virginia twice. In the 1790s, Monroe was appointed by President Washington as the U.S. minister to France. Though his diplomatic style was too warm for Federalist tastes, he gained popularity in France during their revolution. He later served as minister to Britain, working to ease post-war tensions, though not always with success. During President Madison's administration, Monroe served as both Secretary of State and Secretary of War during the War of 1812, the only person in American history to hold both positions simultaneously. His leadership during the war, especially after Washington was burned and morale was low, helped reorganize the military and rebuild confidence, playing a key role in securing an American victory. When Madison's term ended, Monroe was the obvious successor, becoming the 5th president in 1817. His presidency is remembered for what historians call the era of good feelings, a period of national unity, economic growth, and post-war optimism. Monroe toured the country, earning respect across party lines, while steering clear of partisan disputes. He believed in American nationalism, economic development, and westward expansion. One of his most enduring legacies came in 1823, when he articulated a foreign policy statement to Congress which would shape U.S. relations for generations. The Monroe Doctrine declared that the Western Hemisphere was closed to European colonization and that the United States would oppose foreign interference in the affairs of independent nations in the Americas. Though largely drafted by Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, the doctrine bore Monroe's name and resolve. During his presidency, the U.S. acquired Florida from Spain through the Adams-Onnes Treaty and saw 5 new states join the Union. However, this expansion also brought divisions, particularly regarding the issue of slavery. The 1820 Compromise, signed by Monroe, allowed Missouri to join as a slave state and Maine as a free one, while prohibiting slavery north of the 36 degrees 30 minutes line. It temporarily eased tensions, but the slavery issue would resurface. Monroe, a slaveholder himself, hoped to prevent disunion, though his legacy, like that of many founders, remains tied to this contradiction. After serving 2 terms, Monroe retired in 1825, returning to Virginia, where he faced financial struggles, as did many former presidents. His wife, Elizabeth Cartwright Monroe, a graceful First Lady, passed away in 1830. Monroe then moved to New York City to live with his daughter, and on July 4, 1831, 5 years after Jefferson and Adams passed away, he died at the age of 73. This marked the end of an era, with 3 founding fathers and former presidents dying on the anniversary of the nation they helped create. Monroe was the last president who had fought in the Revolutionary War, and the last of the Virginia dynasty. Though not as eloquent as Jefferson or as bold as Washington, Monroe was a steady, unifying figure who prioritized the nation above himself. His doctrine continued to shape American policy, with presidents from Lincoln to Kennedy invoking it. Monroe remains a symbol of quiet leadership and strength through unity. As you reflect, imagine a man walking through Virginia's fields, recalling his youthful days of marching behind George Washington, standing before Congress to declare America's resolve, and carrying the weight of a growing nation. On July 11, 1767, John Quincy Adams was born in Braintree, Massachusetts, to John Adams, the second U.S. president, and Abigail Adams, a sharp intellect and moral guide. As a child, John Quincy witnessed the American Revolution firsthand and traveled across Europe with his father. He was fluent in several languages by adolescence, attended Harvard, and embraced the ideals of liberty and diplomacy. At just 14, he served as secretary to the American envoy in Russia, and by 26, he became the U.S. minister to the Netherlands and later to Prussia. His diplomatic skills earned him praise from George Washington, who called him the most capable of America's young diplomats. Though he was a Federalist, Adams often followed his conscience over party lines, supporting Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase, which angered his party but showcased his commitment to principle. His independence earned him a reputation as a visionary rather than a politician seeking popularity. He was appointed minister to Russia and then to Britain, where he played a key role in negotiating the Treaty of Ghent, ending the War of 1812. As Secretary of State under President Monroe, Adams secured Florida from Spain and set the U.S. border with Spanish territory. He also crafted the Monroe Doctrine, declaring the Americas off-limits to European colonization. In 1824, Adams ran for president in a contested race, winning the House of Representatives vote with support from Henry Clay, though Andrew Jackson's followers decried it as a corrupt bargain. Despite a presidency tainted by suspicion, Adams pursued ambitious goals, such as national universities, scientific institutions, and a broad transportation network. However, Jacksonian opposition in Congress blocked many of his plans. After losing the 1828 election to Jackson, Adams could have retired, but instead he embarked on a remarkable second career. In 1831, he was elected to the House of Representatives, making him the only former president to serve in Congress. There, he found his true calling, advocating for infrastructure, science, and, most notably, the abolition of slavery. Known as Old Man Eloquent, he became famous for his passionate speeches and relentless advocacy. For 17 years, he battled the gag rule that prevented anti-slavery petitions from being read in Congress, fighting for the rights of the voiceless. In 1841, Adams argued before the Supreme Court on behalf of enslaved Africans who had taken control of the ship Amistad after being illegally trafficked. Despite his age and frailty, Adams stood for 4 hours in court, passionately defending their right to freedom, ultimately winning the case. It was a triumph of both law and conscience. In February 1848, while delivering a speech in the House, Adams collapsed at his desk. He was carried to the Speaker's room, where he passed away 2 days later. His final words were, "This is the last of earth. I am content." Having served his country for over 50 years, spanning 3 continents and 6 presidencies, John Quincy Adams was not a populist, nor a war hero, and never the most beloved figure. But he was brilliant, principled, and unwavering in his beliefs. He believed in education, diplomacy, justice, and truth. He envisioned a better America, not just larger or wealthier, but more just and free. Though his presidency was brief, his legacy as a moral force in American politics is unmatched. As you close your eyes, imagine a man walking the halls of Congress, aged but never silenced, standing before the Supreme Court, defending the enslaved with both a trembling voice and a strong will. Picture a child witnessing revolution and a man who never ceased fighting for its promise. John Quincy Adams believed in duty beyond office and truth above power, helping America strive toward justice. Born on March 15, 1767, in a small settlement on the border of North and South Carolina, Andrew Jackson's life was shaped by hardship, poverty, and the echoes of rebellion. His father died before he was born, and by the time he turned 14, he had lost his mother and 2 brothers to the American Revolutionary War. Captured by the British, Jackson was beaten for refusing to polish an officer's boots, a scar that stayed with him. These early experiences forged him into a man of unyielding grit and rage. He studied law in North Carolina, then moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where he built a successful legal career. Known for his quick temper and quicker draw with a pistol, Jackson became infamous for his brilliance and brutality. In Nashville, he met Rachel Donaldson, whose controversial divorce led to years of scandal, but they married, and he remained deeply devoted to her for life. While the law brought him influence, war earned him fame. During the War of 1812, Jackson led U.S. forces against both Native American tribes and the British. His determination earned him the nickname Old Hickory, as tough and unbending as the tree itself. At the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in 1814, he defeated the Creek Nation, opening up vast lands for American settlers. Shortly after, he achieved a remarkable victory at the Battle of New Orleans, where his ragtag forces repelled a seasoned British army with minimal casualties, making him a national hero. Jackson's post-war campaigns included military actions in Spanish Florida, where he clashed with Seminole tribes and executed foreign agents, causing diplomatic tension. His bold actions led to the Adams-Onís Treaty, which ceded Florida to the United States. He briefly served as Florida's governor before returning to Tennessee. However, his legacy was marred by his Indian policies, which would later contribute to one of the most painful chapters in U.S. history. In 1824, Jackson ran for president against John Quincy Adams, winning the popular vote, but losing in the House of Representatives. Infuriated, he accused Adams of a corrupt bargain and vowed revenge. Jackson ran again in 1828, and this time he won, becoming the 7th President of the United States. The first president to rise from humble beginnings, Jackson became both a champion for the common man and a controversial figure, often regarded as a populist tyrant. His presidency from 1829 to 1837 marked a new era in American democracy, expanding suffrage for white men, attacking the political elite, and positioning himself as the people's voice. He used the presidential veto as a powerful tool, most famously abolishing the Second Bank of the United States, which he believed was a corrupt instrument of the wealthy. As he once said, "I was born for a storm, and a calm does not suit me," and his presidency certainly reflected that sentiment. Do you like this personality? One of the most controversial and tragic acts of Jackson's presidency was the Indian Removal Act of 1830. He believed that Native American nations had no place within the expanding United States and pushed policies that forced their relocation to the West. Despite opposition and a Supreme Court ruling in Worcester versus Georgia that supported the Cherokee, Jackson pressed forward. This led to the forced migration known as the Trail of Tears, a period marked by the suffering and death of thousands. This event remains a dark mark on his legacy, one that cannot be overlooked. Jackson also confronted a secession crisis years before the Civil War, when South Carolina threatened to nullify federal tariffs and break away from the Union. In response, Jackson issued a firm warning, stating that secession through armed force was treason, and sent troops to enforce federal law. A compromise resolved the crisis, but it exposed the deep tensions that would later lead to war. In 1837, Jackson retired to the Hermitage, his Tennessee plantation, where he spent his remaining years writing letters, hosting visitors, and observing the country's development. He mourned his wife Rachel, who passed away before he took office, and remained devoted to her memory. Jackson passed away on June 8, 1845, surrounded by family and friends, leaving behind his last words, "Be good children, all of you, and strive to be ready when the change comes." Jackson's legacy is one of contradictions. He expanded democracy while denying it to many, strengthened the presidency while defying the Supreme Court, and was both a hero to some and a villain to others. Nevertheless, he changed the office of the presidency, the nation, and the very idea of what it meant to be an American. As you imagine him, picture a man on horseback silhouetted by cannon fire, sword raised high, or standing alone in the Oval Office, unyielding against the storm. Flawed yet fierce, Jackson became a force because he believed in the power of the people, transforming the presidency into a pulpit and the nation into a battlefield of ideals. Born on December 5, 1782, in Kinderhook, New York, Martin Van Buren was a master strategist who would eventually rise to the White House. He was the first president born after the American Revolution, the first born a citizen of the United States, and the first to prove that politics was a game he could play better than anyone. Van Buren's parents were of Dutch descent, and he grew up speaking Dutch before learning English. His father was a tavern keeper and farmer, which gave young Martin access to political discussions and negotiations. The boy who quietly listened in the corner of the tavern would later orchestrate the rise of modern American politics. Van Buren was sharp, quick-witted, and ambitious. He studied law through an apprenticeship and became a lawyer by 21, though it was politics that truly captivated him. In the New York State Senate, Van Buren became an expert in political organization, believing in coalition building, creating networks, and keeping friends close and rivals closer. He helped form the Albany Regency, a powerful political machine in New York, and earned the nickname the Little Magician for his ability to unite factions and navigate political waters without drawing too much attention. By the 1820s, Van Buren had become a US senator and was gaining influence on the national stage. He opposed elitism and supported the rise of the Democratic Party, championing the rights of the common man. He saw in Andrew Jackson a kindred spirit, strong, popular, and untamed. Van Buren played a key role in organizing Jackson's 1828 presidential campaign, creating a national party with unprecedented discipline. In return, Jackson appointed him Secretary of State and later Vice President. Though the two men were very different in style, Jackson being the storm and Van Buren the quiet wind, Jackson endorsed Van Buren as his successor. In 1837, Van Buren became the 8th President of the United States, stepping into office just as the country faced the panic of 1837, a devastating financial crisis. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, and unemployment soared. Though the crisis had roots before his presidency, Van Buren bore the blame. He resisted calls for heavy federal intervention, believing in limited government and fiscal discipline. Instead, he established the independent treasury system, separating federal funds from private banks. Though this policy is praised today, it was controversial at the time. Despite the economic troubles, Van Buren remained personally popular with many. His elegance, politeness, and conversational skills helped restore a sense of decorum to the presidency after Jackson's tumultuous years. Van Buren was also a strong opponent of the expansion of slavery, balancing between the pressures of abolitionists and Southern resistance. His stance on this issue was cautious, walking a fine line that few could navigate. In 1840, however, the Whigs rallied behind William Henry Harrison, a war hero, using his popularity to challenge Van Buren's presidency. Catchy slogans and imagery of a hard cider and log cabin helped portray Van Buren as out of touch, labeling him as a worn-out figure. The strategy worked, and Van Buren lost re-election in a landslide. After leaving office, he didn't fade away. He attempted a political comeback in 1844, but lost the Democratic nomination to James K. Polk. In 1848, he boldly opposed the expansion of slavery, running as the Free Soil Party candidate. Though he knew he wouldn't win, his campaign shifted the national dialogue towards anti-slavery. This was his final campaign, driven by principle rather than ambition. Van Buren retired to his cherished estate, Lindenwold in Kinderhook, where he wrote his memoirs, entertained visitors, and watched as the nation grew more divided over slavery. He passed away on July 24, 1862, amid the civil war he had tried to avert. Despite his presidency faltering in times of crisis, his political brilliance, party-building skills, and anti-slavery stance made him a crucial figure in America's development. Van Buren didn't win wars or pen grand speeches, but he built the machine that kept American democracy functioning. He created the first modern political party, advocated for majority rule, and valued organization, debate, and peaceful transitions of power. He was a tactician of republics, a conductor of democracy. Imagine him in a fine coat, pacing a quiet study with pen in hand, crafting strategies that shaped nations, sipping coffee at dawn, reviewing letters from across the country, and carefully weaving alliances that held a fragile union together. Martin Van Buren saw politics as an art, and through his efforts, the United States became a more democratic and responsive republic. Born on February 9th, 1773 in Charles City County, Virginia, William Henry Harrison was a child of the American Revolution. His father, Benjamin Harrison I, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Raised with the ideals of liberty and governance, young William was destined for greatness. Though initially meant for medicine, his path diverged. In 1791, he joined the U.S. Army and quickly rose to prominence during the Northwest Indian War, serving under General Anthony Wayne. His leadership at the Battle of Fallen Timbers helped secure American control of the Northwest Territory, earning him promotions and recognition. Harrison married Anna Toothill Sims, the daughter of a prominent judge, and they had 10 children. As governor of the Indiana Territory, Harrison became known for negotiating land deals with Native American tribes, many of which sparked controversy. Tensions boiled over in 1811 when Harrison led U.S. forces to victory at the Battle of Tippecanoe against Tecumseh's Confederation, solidifying his reputation as a frontier hero. His fame continued to grow during the War of 1812, where he led U.S. forces to victory at the Battle of the Thames, securing the region for the United States. After the war, Harrison retired to his farm in North Bend, Ohio, but was drawn back into politics. He served as a congressman, senator, and minister to Columbia, often advocating for Western expansion and veterans' rights. Though not known for eloquent speeches, Harrison was admired for his sense of duty and service. As tensions over slavery and states' rights increased, Harrison emerged as a unifying figure, a war hero with few political ties. In 1840, the Whig Party nominated Harrison for president against Martin Van Buren. The campaign crafted an image of Harrison as a humble frontiersman living in a log cabin and drinking hard cider, embodying the common man. In reality, Harrison came from a privileged background, but the image stuck with slogans, parades, and songs energizing voters. Harrison won in a landslide, and on March 4, 1841, he became the 9th President of the United States. At 68, the oldest person ever elected to the office at that time. Determined to show strength, Harrison delivered the longest inaugural address in history, a 2-hour speech in freezing rain without a coat or hat. Just a month later, he fell ill and died on April 4, 1841, just 31 days after taking office. His death set a crucial constitutional precedent. Vice President John Tyler assumed the presidency, establishing the rule of presidential succession that is still in place today. Harrison's brief presidency, though marked by his untimely death, left a lasting impact on the nation's understanding of executive power. Is this conversation helpful so far? It ignited debate, but also brought the nation together in shared sorrow. He was remembered not only for what he might have achieved as president, but for his life of military valor, public service, and quiet humility. He had lived fully and passed away at the peak of public trust. Though his presidency was brief, his influence endured for years. His grandson, Benjamin Harrison, would later serve as the 23rd president. His campaign methods helped usher in the era of modern elections, and his handling of a crisis clarified the nation's stance on presidential succession. He wasn't a philosopher or visionary, but a soldier, a father, and a reluctant politician who served when needed. As you imagine him, picture a man in a log cabin sipping cider with a saber from Tippecanoe above the hearth, riding into the rain on Inauguration Day, full of pride and hope, unaware that history would remember him more for his short tenure than his extended service. William Henry Harrison believed in duty over comfort and gave his all, even if it was for just a month. John Tyler, born on March 29, 1790, in Charles City County, Virginia, came into the world as part of a family steeped in American tradition. His father, John Tyler Sr., was a judge, governor, and close ally of Thomas Jefferson. From an early age, Tyler was raised with values of states' rights, classical education, and Southern pride. He graduated from the College of William and Mary at 17 and became a lawyer by 19, though his true passion lay in politics. Tyler quickly ascended the political ladder, serving in the Virginia legislature, the U.S. House of Representatives, as governor of Virginia and as a U.S. senator. A staunch advocate of states' rights, a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. He defied expectations and changed constitutional history, becoming a president who wasn't meant to be, yet left an indelible mark on the office. Some view him as stubborn, others as principled, but all agree his impact was undeniable. His story is one of unexpected influence, solitary leadership, and quiet resolve. Picture him walking alone through the halls of the White House, carrying the weight of a nation's doubt, yet continuing to lead. Imagine him drafting letters to foreign leaders, driven by a mind intent on securing borders and expanding a young nation, all while holding the Constitution as his guiding principle. The presidency endured even when the world questioned its future. Born on November 2, 1795, in a log cabin in Pineville, North Carolina, James Knox Polk would grow up to reshape the nation's future. From humble beginnings, he became one of the most determined and overlooked presidents in American history. Sickly as a child and often in pain, James underwent surgery at 17 without anesthesia, a painful experience that would mark him but also fuel his resilience. Quiet, focused, and serious, he was raised with strong religious values from his mother and ambition from his father. Polk graduated with honors from the University of North Carolina, earning a reputation as a sharp debater. After studying law in Tennessee, he opened a practice and quickly entered politics, first serving in the Tennessee legislature and then in the U.S. House of Representatives for 14 years. A devoted Jacksonian Democrat, he believed in limited government expansion and populism. He eventually became Speaker of the House, the only president to have held this role. After a brief tenure as governor of Tennessee, Polk disappeared from the political scene until 1844. The Democratic National Convention was dead, a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. To retry. Imagine a young nation's fate embodied in a man who stood before a map of North America, dreaming of a United States spanning from ocean to ocean, and then, convinced that deeds outweigh applause, made that vision concrete. James K. Polk reshaped a continent by acting where others merely spoke. On November 24, 1784, in a simple log cabin in Orange County, Virginia, Zachary Taylor was born, a boy destined for a life in the saddle. His family soon settled near the Ohio River in Kentucky, a rough land teeming with peril, promise, and the spirit of Western expansion. Taylor grew up hardy and unrefined, with a scant education, but unshakable loyalty and courage. In 1808, he entered the U.S. Army as a first lieutenant, out of a sense of duty, not glory. What began as a modest commission evolved into a 40-year military career. He fought in the War of 1812, the Black Hawk War, and the Second Seminole War. Yet a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. He grew up largely self-taught, learning by the light of a fireplace and borrowing every book he could find. He worked as an apprentice clothmaker and later studied law, managing to save enough money to attend New Hope Academy and eventually becoming a lawyer in Buffalo, New York. His life wasn't predetermined. It was shaped through perseverance in the face of hardship. In Buffalo, Fillmore gained respect for his dedication, humility, and sense of fairness. He was soft-spoken, polite, and precise. He married his childhood sweetheart, Abigail Powers, a teacher who shared his serious, bookish nature. Together they created a home centered on quiet study and shared ambition. In 1828, Fillmore was elected to the New York State Assembly, and in 1832 to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for several terms. As a member of the Whig Party, he supported economic progress, the American system, and internal improvements, such as roads and canals. He wasn't a fiery speaker, but rather a listener and negotiator, preferring thoughtful compromise over bold pronouncements. However, in an era of growing tensions, his calm demeanor would become both a strength and a burden. After Congress, Fillmore served as New York State Comptroller, introducing accountability and reforms in public finance. He was also instrumental in founding the University at Buffalo and became its first chancellor. To him, education was not just a means to rise, but a lasting legacy. In 1848, the Whigs nominated Zachary Taylor, the war hero, for president, and chose Fillmore as his vice president to provide balance with a northern moderate. The pairing was unconventional: Taylor, the rugged general, and Fillmore, the quiet lawyer. But it worked, and they won the election. As vice president, Fillmore had little influence as Taylor largely sidelined him, but everything changed when Taylor unexpectedly passed away in July 1850, making Fillmore president. The nation he inherited was on the verge of collapse, with the slavery debate intensifying. California wanted to join as a free state, and Southerners threatened secession. Congress was deadlocked, and Fillmore, the accidental president, found himself at the heart of the crisis, trying to hold the fragile Union together. Many remember Fillmore for signing the Compromise of 1850, a series of laws designed to ease tensions between the North and South. California entered as a free state, the slave trade was abolished in Washington, D.C., and Utah and New Mexico were organized as territories with no restrictions on slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act, which required the return of escaped slaves, was also passed. Fillmore believed this compromise would save the Union, calling it the final settlement on slavery's expansion. Though he signed all parts of the compromise, including the Fugitive Slave Act, he did so reluctantly. Many in the North never forgave him for it. While it temporarily reduced secessionist talk, it further divided the nation. Northern abolitionists condemned him, and Southern radicals didn't trust him, while the Whig Party, already divided, began to fracture beyond repair. Yet Fillmore stood firm, prioritizing the Constitution, the Union, and peace over political or ideological allegiances. He modernized the White House, strengthened the Navy, and sent Commodore Matthew Perry to Japan, establishing early foundations for future trade relations with Asia. These foreign efforts didn't bear fruit during his presidency, but he planted the seeds. In 1852, Fillmore sought the Whig nomination again, but lost to Winfield Scott, and the Whigs lost the election, leading to the party's collapse. In 1856, Fillmore returned as the candidate for the Know Nothing Party, a short-lived nativist movement. He ran not to win, but to restore stability and balance. He only won Maryland, but his candidacy split the vote, foreshadowing the rise of the Republican Party. After this, Fillmore retired from politics. In his later years, he became a beloved figure in Buffalo, where he founded libraries, served on hospital boards, and helped rebuild the city after a major fire. His first wife, Abigail, passed away in 1858, and he married Caroline Carmichael, a well-educated widow. Fillmore passed away on March 8, 1874, at the age of 74. By then, the Civil War had come and gone, and the compromise he had once hoped would save the nation had only delayed the inevitable. Millard Fillmore wasn't a visionary or a warrior. He wasn't one to spark revolutions, but to try and calm them. He was a man of books, law, and balance, a man who rose from poverty to the presidency with nothing but his own effort and intellect. In 1852, during the Democratic National Convention, party leaders, unable to reach a decision after 48 ballots, chose Franklin as a compromise candidate. Though he had been out of politics for a decade, his military service, unblemished record, and charm made him the ideal candidate. He campaigned on unity, peace, and democratic values, winning by a landslide. However, just weeks before his inauguration, tragedy struck. Franklin, Jane, and their son Benjamin were traveling by train when a derailment killed young Benny, decapitating him before their eyes. Jane, devastated, believed that the presidency was a punishment from God and withdrew into mourning. Franklin, deeply affected, entered the White House with a broken heart. Pierce's presidency, which began with high hopes, soon faltered. His support for the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which repealed the Missouri Compromise and allowed territories to decide on slavery through popular sovereignty, sparked violence known as Bleeding Kansas. His failure to end the violence and his enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act angered Northern abolitionists, further eroding his popularity. His firm stance on keeping Southern support alienated many in his own party, earning him the label of a Northern man with Southern sympathies. By 1856, the Democratic Party abandoned him in favor of James Buchanan. Defeated, Franklin returned to New Hampshire, where he and Jane lived quietly. Jane remained in mourning until her death in 1863. Franklin never fully recovered from the loss of his son, his wife, and his reputation. During the Civil War, he opposed secession but criticized Lincoln's wartime powers. Once a beloved figure, he became a forgotten relic of a bygone era. His drinking worsened, and his correspondence with Nathaniel Hawthorne remained one of his few comforts. Franklin Pierce passed away on October 8, 1869, at the age of 64 in Concord, New Hampshire, with little fanfare. His presidency is often remembered as a cautionary tale marked by missed opportunities and failed leadership. Yet, beneath his shortcomings, he was a man who loved his family dearly, believed strongly in the Union, and sought peace above all. Perhaps he was not suited for the tumultuous politics of the 1850s, too gentle and grief-stricken for a nation on the brink of war. As you close your eyes, imagine a quiet room in a New Hampshire home where a man sits alone by the fire. A letter from an old friend in one hand and a glass in the other. He isn't scheming for power. He's reminiscing about a young boy with a bright smile, a wife's soft laughter, and a country that once seemed unified because Franklin Pierce prioritized unity over politics and peace over pride. He became a symbol of sorrow in a time of fury. Born on April 23, 1791, in a log cabin in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania, to a frontier merchant and farmer, James Buchanan would grow to be a man of refinement, legal brilliance, and deep contradictions. He remains the only bachelor president in U.S. history and the last to serve before the Civil War. Raised in a prosperous Scotch-Irish family, Buchanan attended Dickinson College, where he earned a reputation for both mischief and intellect. After law school, he opened a successful practice in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, becoming one of the state's most respected attorneys. Yet Buchanan's life was never meant to be limited to the courtroom. Politics soon called to him. In his 20s, he entered the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and then moved quickly to the U.S. House, serving for 10 years as a Federalist-turned-Democrat. He was a polished, persuasive, and meticulous figure who valued law, order, and diplomacy above all else. Tall, elegant, and always impeccably dressed, Buchanan became a fixture in Washington. He was briefly engaged to Anne Coleman, but their relationship ended in heartbreak. Anne died shortly afterward, and Buchanan never married, dedicating himself entirely to public service. Over the following decades, Buchanan served as U.S. Minister to Russia under Andrew Jackson, a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, and Secretary of State under James K. Polk, where he helped resolve the Oregon boundary dispute and supported the Mexican-American War. In 1853, President Franklin Pierce appointed him minister to Great Britain, where he played a role in negotiating the contentious Ostend Manifesto, which sought to acquire Cuba. The document sparked widespread backlash, but Buchanan's time abroad allowed him to stay largely out of the political turmoil brewing at home, something his supporters would later use to their advantage. By 1856, the nation was on the brink, torn apart by slavery, territorial expansion, and states' rights. Buchanan's extensive experience, moderate stance, and absence from the Kansas-Nebraska debates made him the ideal Democratic candidate. He defeated Republican John C. Fremont and former President Millard Fillmore, securing the presidency with support from both the South and Northern Democrats. As the 15th president, Buchanan inherited a fractured union. He believed in a constitutional approach, thinking compromise and law could preserve the nation. However, his efforts often appeased the South and alienated the North. He supported the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution in Kansas despite clear corruption in its creation, believing that the issue of slavery should be left to the states and territories, not the federal government. The Supreme Court's infamous Dred Scott decision, which ruled that African Americans were not citizens and that Congress had no authority to ban slavery in the territories, worsened Buchanan's position. His behind-the-scenes pressure on the court undermined his credibility and harmed his reputation. By Buchanan's final year in office, the crisis had escalated. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry shocked the nation, and the Democratic Party splintered. In the 1860 election, Abraham Lincoln won without securing a single Southern state, leading Southern states to secede one by one. Buchanan, paralyzed by legalism, declared secession illegal, but also claimed that the federal government had no power to stop it. He took no action to prevent the seizure of federal forts and military installations across the South, offering only patience as the nation fell apart. In March 1861, Buchanan handed the presidency over to Abraham Lincoln. As he left the White House, he is said to have told Lincoln, "If you are as happy in entering the presidency as I am in leaving it, you are a very happy man." He returned to his estate in Pennsylvania, where he spent the rest of his life writing his memoirs and defending his legacy. He died on June 1st, 1868, a year after the Civil War had ended. James Buchanan is often ranked among the least effective U.S. presidents, criticized for his failure to act at a critical moment in history. Yet he was not a man driven by malice. A man of law and diplomacy, he believed in the power of compromise to heal wounds. But the nation needed boldness, not caution, vision, not delay. His tragedy wasn't in his intent, but in his inaction. As you close your eyes and drift off to sleep, imagine a grand estate in Pennsylvania, its halls lined with books, the study glowing with candlelight. An elderly man sits at a desk, pen in hand, trying to explain where it all went wrong. He wasn't a tyrant or villain, just a man unable to halt a rising tide because he believed the Constitution could withstand the storm. He waited for peace while war marched on. On February 12, 1809, a child was born in a small log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, who would one day reshape the concept of freedom in America. His name was Abraham Lincoln. From the humblest of origins, he rose to become the 16th President of the United States and one of its most beloved figures. The son of Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln, frontier farmers with limited means, his early life was difficult. The family moved frequently before settling in Indiana and later Illinois. Lincoln's mother passed away when he was 9, leaving a wound that never truly healed. With less than a year of formal education, he devoured books wherever he could find them. The Bible, Shakespeare, and law books shaped his thinking, which was honed not in academic halls but by oil lamps in the wilderness. Tall, awkward, and gangly, Lincoln became known for his quick wit, deep melancholy, and remarkable wisdom. In his youth, Lincoln worked as a rail splitter, store clerk, postmaster, and surveyor, gradually building a reputation in New Salem and Springfield, Illinois. He studied law on his own, passed the bar in 1836, and began practicing in Springfield. He traveled the circuit courts on horseback, earning a reputation as an engaging storyteller, a sharp legal mind, and a man of unquestionable integrity, earning the nickname Honest Abe. In 1842, he married Mary Todd, a sharp-minded woman from a wealthy Kentucky family. Their marriage was often turbulent but full of affection, and they had 4 sons, though only Robert survived into adulthood. Lincoln served in the Illinois state legislature as a member of the Whig Party and later won a term in Congress, where he opposed the Mexican-American War and criticized the spread of slavery. However, his views were not yet radical. He briefly returned to law, uncertain of his political future. But with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which allowed slavery to spread into new territories, Lincoln was horrified. He re-entered politics with a renewed commitment to stopping the expansion of slavery, helping to found the Republican Party. Though not an abolitionist in the strictest sense, he believed slavery was morally wrong and politically destructive. The famous Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858 marked a turning point. Lincoln challenged Senator Stephen A. Douglas, engaging in a series of debates across Illinois. His moral clarity and sharp rhetoric dazzled audiences, famously declaring, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Though he lost the Senate race, he gained national recognition. In 1860, he secured the Republican nomination for president and won the election, defeating a fractured Democratic opposition. His election prompted 7 Southern states to secede before he was even inaugurated. Abraham Lincoln entered the White House in March 1861, with the nation on the brink of disintegration. In April, Fort Sumter was attacked, and the Civil War began. Lincoln, without military experience, proved to be a strategic leader, carefully selecting commanders, managing public opinion, and expanding presidential powers. His decisions were criticized from all sides, too slow, too radical, too cautious, but he remained steady. He sought solace in poetry, paced the White House in sorrow, and buried 2 of his sons while in office. Yet he carried the immense weight of leading a nation torn apart. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in Confederate-held territories were free. While it did not abolish slavery outright, which required a constitutional amendment, it transformed the war into a moral crusade and allowed black soldiers to join the Union Army. Lincoln considered this his most significant legacy. In November of the same year, he delivered the Gettysburg Address at a cemetery in Pennsylvania in just 272 words, redefining American democracy with the phrase, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." The war continued, bloody and uncertain, but Lincoln remained unwavering in his commitment to reunification and mercy, refusing to demonize the South. In 1864, he was re-elected, despite the exhaustion and grief of war. His second term began with optimism, as General Ulysses S. Grant was nearing victory. Lincoln spoke of healing the nation's wounds, with malice toward none, with charity for all. On April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered, and the war ended. Just 5 days later, on April 14, 1865, Lincoln was shot by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater. He died the next morning. His assassination shocked the world, and his funeral procession, winding through cities, was met with mourning from millions. Lincoln had become more than a president. He symbolized unity, sacrifice, and the American promise. He preserved the Union, ended slavery, and reshaped the idea of liberty. As you imagine his figure walking through the White House at night, reading Shakespeare by candlelight with grief in his eyes but resolve in his heart, picture him signing the Emancipation Proclamation, not just as a gesture, but as a commitment to the nation's future. A renewal of the nation's spirit. Imagine him in a crowd at Gettysburg speaking words that still resonate across time, because Abraham A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. The horseman was renowned for his composed bravery and quiet determination. After graduating, Grant distinguished himself in the Mexican and network era occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. After earning his law degree from Harvard, he returned to Ohio to build a career as a lawyer, gaining respect for his intelligence and integrity. He married Lucy, a well-educated and principled woman who would become the first Lady with a college degree. Together they raised 8 children, 3 of whom lived to adulthood, while deeply committing to abolitionism, temperance, and reform. When the Civil War began, Hayes, despite being nearly 40 and a father of young children, enlisted in the Union Army, quickly rising to the rank of brigadier general. He was wounded several times, most seriously at South Mountain, yet continued to lead his men even after being shot in the arm. His courage earned the loyalty of his troops and the respect of his peers. Following the war, Hayes entered politics, serving as a U.S. congressman and then as governor of Ohio, gaining a reputation as a moderate reformer. He was admired for his honesty, his support for public education, and his advocacy for African American rights in the post-war years. In 1876, he was nominated for president by his party as a trustworthy and uncontroversial candidate amid widespread political corruption. His opponent, a reform-minded governor from New York, won the popular vote, but 20 electoral votes from 4 states were disputed. After weeks of confusion and negotiations, a compromise was reached, and Hayes became president. As part of the agreement, federal troops were withdrawn from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. Though his presidency began with compromise, it was marked by a commitment to integrity and ideals. He believed in equal rights, civil service reform, and healing a divided nation. He ended Reconstruction believing the South could be reconciled, though this view would later be seen as naive. He fought against political patronage, reformed the civil service, supported education for Black Americans, and called for racial justice even as federal enforcement waned. He kept his promise to serve only 1 term, refusing to seek re-election. His leadership was often criticized as passive and idealistic, but he governed with firm principles and unwavering ethics. After leaving office in 1881, he retired to his estate in Ohio, but he continued to stay active, promoting education, especially for black students and those in the South, advocating for prison reform, supporting temperance, and encouraging civic responsibility. He served on various education boards and charitable organizations, quietly advancing the causes he believed in. He and Lucy, his devoted partner in both life and ideals, remained together until her death in 1889. He passed away 4 years later on January 17, 1893. Rutherford B. Hayes is not often remembered as one of America's most famous presidents. His name doesn't evoke grand monuments or legendary tales, but his life was a model of humility, service, and moral courage. He believed that leadership wasn't about power or spectacle, but about purpose and doing what was right. He aimed to restore trust in the presidency, heal the wounds of war, and guide the country toward hope. As you think about him, imagine a man walking through quiet woods in Ohio, his hand in his wife's, his thoughts on the children who were learning in the schools he helped create. He smiles, not because of fame or recognition, but because he knew he had served with honor. Is this conversation helpful so far?